Thank you, Laskin Corlett. Minister, I wanted to ask you again about another school provision in the West Dublin area, this time in relation to Ashtown. Ashtown, as you know, has become a much bigger community now with many new homes. Minister, do you think it's appropriate that children will go down 2 flights of stairs in a gym, attend a school with no natural light, no natural ventilation and no play area? And the reason, it would seem, Minister, is because the Department of Education failed to lodge the planning application and make the necessary protocols for a temporary building. So can you explain, Minister?
Minister.
Again, thank you, Deputy, for raising the question. The school referred to by Deputy Coppinger opened in September this year in interim accommodation, which I think everyone agrees is not satisfactory accommodation. That's why it's interim. Following the pre-planning discussions with the relevant planning authority, my department lodged a planning application in April this year, with a view to facilitating the new school coming into operation from this September. However, the planning process was protracted. This is even after we had pre-planning at an earlier stage. A request for additional information from the local authority relating to drainage and infrastructural improvements was received, which substantially extended the planning timeframe. As the Deputy will appreciate, the planning process is outside of my department's control, and we did proactively engage, as I said already, with pre-planning at the first opportunity in this planning application. I am pleased to confirm that the final grant of planning permission in this case was received on the 17th of September. So a contractor has been appointed, and the school will move from its interim accommodation to this new accommodation as soon as the necessary works to make this accommodation suitable for a school have been completed, which looks to be on schedule for mid-November.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Ruth Coppinger.
Minister, can you clarify if the children will be out of this dungeon effectively in November, as Educate Together was promised? The only reason that parents gave this a shot was because they felt they'd no choice. There were other alternatives, busing children up to Blanchardstown or up to Castleknock, but parents decided to put a bit of faith and to go with this, with the proviso. They're not waiting for a permanent school building to move into. That would take a long time. There's meant to be a temporary school building. Will that be ready? Will they be out of there in November? Or are you seriously expecting children to stay in one of these basements of a gym, which had to be subdivided, which had to have toilets put in? And again, it really does boil down to misplanning. Rathbourne area was developed over many years. It was planned for years. It was known that people would actually have children and that those children would actually need a school. And Ashdown Educate Together was deemed to be necessary by the Department for many years.
Thank you, Deputy.
So therefore, Minister, can you just clarify, have the parents to wait for the permanent building that you're talking about, or will they be out of here into a more suitable, appropriate temporary dwelling?
Thank you, Minister.
I think, Deputy, you know very well that they won't, because the contract is signed for this temporary school for 3 years, and you know that. And the site will be ready in mid-November. The contractor has been appointed, and they'll move from that temporary accommodation, which is not satisfactory at the moment, in mid-November, as planned and as agreed. And as again, the department went to councillors in the area. The area suffered from bad planning. That's correct, for a long number of years, mainly on the previous administrations. We'll find out yet again. So just to be clear, the department viewed this site, this temporary building, for the next 3 years in February of this year. On the 24th of March, the department officials held a pre-planning meeting with officials in Dublin City Council to discuss the proposed planning application for the conversion of the building to a temporary school to be satisfactory for the next 3 years. The department's consultant architect had further discussions before planning with officials in the traffic and drainage section of the local authority in the context of making a planning application. On the 7th of April, just to be clear, the department received confirmation from the landlord, and they approved in principle a 3-year lease for this temporary school for the next 3 years, and got approval to lodge a planning application. The planning was lodged less than 2 weeks later, on the 24th of April, and the local authority then subsequently returned a request for additional information. Information that referred to drainage, provision of footpaths and pedestrian crossing. And that was after we had pre-planning with them in March. Just to be clear on that. So that did delay the application, but now planning permission was granted 12th of August and fully granted on the 17th of September, and things are moving out for mid-November.
I'll come back to you, Deputy Ruth Coppinger.
Minister, what this points up is the need for total and utter change in planning in this country. Every community that I've ever been involved with has had to campaign, lobby, hold public meetings, get petitions in order to get a school. We need to end this fiasco once and for all. And Minister, will you commit to amending Section 4 of the Planning Act, which doesn't even say that schools are a necessary part of a community? There's no requirement to actually put in and allocate schools when a community is being planned. This has to completely stop. Sites have to be identified, and they have to be sites have a clear structure as to how sites will come about. The previous regime, Fianna Fáil, I believe, and the PDs refused to change that. But it's up to you now. If you're going to carry on into the next regime, well, obviously you probably won't in the guise that you're in at the moment. But will you commit to amending the Planning Act so that people don't have to go campaigning? Like, it isn't rocket science. People move into homes. A few years later, they'll probably have children and they'll probably need a school.
Yeah, Deputy, you probably never admit it, but this administration has changed the system, and there is a structure in place. The structure you've just requested is already in place now with local authorities on the provision of sites, and that's why in the last 3 or 4 years we've managed to deal with the majority of the demand for primary places, because that was a crisis point. And in the last 5-year plan, which finishes off next year, and the new plans to come out in months ahead, that urgency in primary education has more or less been matched and dealt with. And rightly so. And now the move moves on now to make sure we have the same solutions for secondary places. But this administration has dealt with it, and has dealt with local authorities and put in place that new structure that should have been there years ago. I totally agree with you. And a complete and utter failing when it came to planning. That's been corrected as best we could and as quick as we could in our short couple of years in government, and we hope to continue that kind of reform in our next phase in government. And I don't think everybody shares your view that this administration won't be back to continue the good work in education.